Greetings, friends. Greetings from Sabil. Greetings from Jerusalem. It's a pleasure to have you all with us in another Kumi session this week. We're still helping people get into the meeting room. Some people are having problems. Hopefully, we'll be able to deal with them. But in the meanwhile, why don't you all write in the chat where you're from and just say hi? We'd appreciate it so that everybody knows who's in the meeting. My name is Omar Harami, and I will be helping in the preparation of this meeting and in the facilitation. Some of you are already aware of who I am. I've been part of Sabil since 2006. Currently, I am the director and blessed to be in a movement that is so rich with a mosaic of members and supporters from around the world. Today, we are going to be presenting another piece of work or a document that has been prepared by Reverend Naim. Reverend Naim has prepared almost over 10 documents during COVID. Some are new papers, some are rewriting papers that he has already presented at different conferences. This has been a true blessing for Sabil and for all of the supporters of Palestinian liberation theology to have the father of Palestinian liberation theology dedicating more time to reflecting, writing, and developing Palestinian liberation theology, a theology that is very much needed and appreciated among the Palestinian Christian community, but also many communities around the world. Today, Sabil is blessed with friendship from the Muslim and from the Jewish and from the Samaritan communities. Some of you are also with us who have been very much dedicated and part of the movement for so many years. This document that we are going to be sharing today, and we're blessed with wonderful speakers. We have like multiple people who are also from the co-founders of Sabil, and we will present them and introduce them in due time, is on religious extremism. Now, religious extremism is not only a matter of a discussion at a university class or even at a debate over while people are having a coffee or even a glass of wine over dinner. Religious extremism is a serious issue here in the Middle East. Literally, people could lose their house, they could lose their family, they could lose their life and be dispossessed and suffer from religious extremism. In many parts of the world, religion is something that is not major, does not play a major role in their daily lives. But in the Middle East, it's both a blessing and a problem for us. Reverend Naim has asked me to speak a little bit about the first few pages in the booklet. And religious extremism is not unique to a specific religion or to a group of people. Religion extremism exists in almost every religion, but when it comes to the monotheistic religions, it is present in Christianity, in Islam, and in Judaism. In Islam, it has been manifested with ISIS that came to power and ruled many parts of the Middle East through a very short period of time. They reintroduced slavery in the Middle East. They were committing large massacres, killing hundreds of people, reintroduced sex slaves, forcing people to convert in masses, and whoever refused or even did not play by the rules lost their head. ISIS was a clear manifestation of ugly religious extremism within the Muslim community. And it did not really, especially for the people in the West, when we speak about Arab religious extremism or Islamic extremism, due to many factors, it is not something that needs plenty of convincing. Everybody expects bad things coming out from the Middle East, and nobody expects good things to come out of Islam or Arabs. In Judaism, it's a little bit different. Israel is seen mainly in the West as a democratic country, a part of the Western world. And that's why Israel is very much appreciated. So it needs more convincing when we speak about religious extremism within the Jewish community, especially the Jewish community in the West is small communities, minorities that are not seen as a threat, but as every minority tries their best always to engage in promoting diversity and coexistence. Today, religious extremism, especially with the new government in Israel, is a reality. We feel that religious extremism is even gaining more power than traditional Zionism inside Israel, secular Zionism. We're listening to rhetoric, political slogans that are very frightening. And it's not only that they're saying the words, they're walking the walk, religious extremists. And this is very bad news for the future of the Middle East, but especially for us as Palestinians. When it comes to Palestine and Israel conflict, Christians, unfortunately, Christianity has not also been immune to religious extremism. But the strongest manifestation of Christian Zionism, of Christian extremism, religious extremism, is Christian Zionism. Literally, there would be buses who would stop and pray for Armageddon, pray for war, pray for bloodshed. They believe that this is the path that brings back Jesus. This is the path that would bring eventually the Prince of Peace and future peace. So religious extremism, we encourage you as you read or engage in this document and you learn, because we need to combat it. Because religion could be used as a beautiful tool to help to promote coexistence and people coming together and working together, but it could be a very ugly manifestation of reasons or justifications why to dispossess people and kill each other. Unfortunately, many of the scriptures and the holy books have material that could promote both versions of the story. Without having eyes and hearts that are open for coexistence and working together, we will all fall victims for religious extremism. Now, I would like to introduce one of the most important people in my life who has very much influenced my life and my work at Sabil. She is a co-founder of Sabil. Many of you already know her, but she is a true inspiration for all of us. She is the conscience of Sabil. Everybody, before we do anything, we always consult with her. And she's the one who really guides us most of the times. Cedar Duaybis is, I would call her also the mother of Palestinian liberation theology, or one of the mothers of Palestinian liberation theology. Cedar Duaybis, may you please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Omar. You always exaggerate, Omar. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this second chapter in Asis's booklet. And this chapter is a lecture that Asis Naim gave in 2017, 5 years ago, in Des Moines, Iowa. And it's like a prophetic words. He saw the writing on the wall and warned about it, about what really came to be and is happening right now. The title of this chapter of the booklet is When Religion Becomes the Problem. And I would add, when religion goes hand in hand with nationalism, it becomes an impossible problem. Some political analysts that I listen to are saying that this is the beginning of the third Israel. The first being from 1948, the establishment of the state, until 1977, it was secular Zionism. Israel was established by secular Zionists. In 1977, the right-wing party, the Likud party, took over under the leadership of Menachem Begin. So this was the second Israel. And it lasted until now. The last government was mixed. It was a right-wing government, but it had some center-left elements in it to moderate it. So now we are beginning the third Israel. This is what some analysts say. Now, religious Zionism is a new, strong political party that won 14 seats in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, together with Otzma Yehudit, which means Jewish power, and Noam, a religious party. They formed the third biggest party in the Knesset after the Likud and the Yesh Atid, the last government. Now, Assis Naim points out that two incidents ushered in this stage. The first event happened on February the 25th of 1994, when the American-born Jewish doctor Baruch Goldstein went into the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron and shot dead 29 Muslim worshippers while at prayer. He was killed because to stop him, they took hold of him and they killed him. At his funeral, now I want to show you how extreme this extreme is. At his funeral, the rabbi who eulogized him, Rabbi Yaakov Perrin, said, 1 million Arabs are not worth a Jewish fingernail. I'm going to repeat this. This was at the funeral of Baruch Goldstein, the Jewish doctor who murdered 29 Muslim worshippers while worshiping. 1 million Arabs are not worth a Jewish fingernail. Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister at that time. When he spoke about the incidents in the Knesset, in parliament, he underestimated the power of religious ideology. And his words in the Knesset were, I quote, Baruch Goldstein and his followers are a foreign implant and an errant weed, he said. Sensible Judaism spits you out. You are a shame on Zionism and an embarrassment to Judaism. 10 months later, he, Yitzhak Rabin, on the 4th of November of 1995, was assassinated by a young Israeli Jewish extremist driven by the same religious ideology. Why did Dr. Baruch Goldstein betray his oath as a medical doctor, which is to maintain the utmost respect for human life? Why did he betray his oath? Because he believed that what he was doing not only had divine approval, but was done at the command of divinity. Israeli extremist settlers have taken the law into their own hands and undertake what is called price tag attacks. Those are very familiar to us, which extract a price from the Palestinians for any effort by the Israeli government to limit Jewish settlements on the West Bank. Or if they try a soldier who has killed a Palestinian, or do anything that they don't like, they place the price tag on us, the Palestinians, and they extract the price from us. They also target Christian churches and holy sites, like the Church of the Multiplication of the Loaves and the Fishes in Tabra, on the shores of the Lake of Galilee, which they burnt. Many of those religious settlers have, over the years, joined the Israeli army and occupied key positions, not only the army. They have entered every department, every ministry, and they have taken key positions. They have now won the Israeli elections and are ministers of the most sensitive and important ministries. Tomorrow, we are expecting the formation of the new government tomorrow. Tomorrow is the deadline. And it's going to be an unbelievable and scary government. They have changed basic laws to suit their purposes and expand their powers. These settlers show total disregard for international law and negate any right of the Palestinians to any part of the land. These extremist settlers have gone beyond Zionism and have morphed into religious zealotry. They believe that Zionism is passé and is no longer needed. They want to live according to the law as written in the Torah and the Halakha, Jewish law. They believe that taking their land back, notice the word back, they believe that taking their land back from the Palestinians is transferring it from the satanic to the divine sphere. According to them, when a Jew kills a non-Jew, he is exempt and has not violated the commandment, thou shalt not kill. For them, the Talmud states that two contrary types of souls exist. The non-Jewish soul stems from the satanic sphere, while the Jewish soul stems from holiness. So when they kill a soul from the non-Jewish, so from the satanic sphere, they have not killed a human being. Rabbi Cook, the chief rabbi of Palestine in the 1920s, has said that the difference between a Jewish soul and the souls of non-Jews is greater and deeper than the difference between a human soul and souls of cattle. So I read a headline in Haaretz the other day about the new economic plan of Bezalel Smotrich, who's going to be the minister of finance, I think, but he has also parts of other ministries. And the title said, "It's Deuteronomy, stupid. It's Deuteronomy." So that is when religion is becomes the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cedar. Now we move to Jonathan Kuttab. Jonathan Kuttab is another person from the co-founders of Sabil. Jonathan Kuttab, a Palestinian lawyer who has been involved in many court cases and nonviolent resistance throughout the world, especially in Palestine and in the US. Jonathan currently is the executive director of Friends of Sabil North America. Jonathan?
Thank you, Omar. There is so much to say about this very, very valuable booklet. I was asked to comment on one particular example of Jewish extremism. But I want to say that this booklet was written before the recent elections. The recent elections brought into power, as Samia just mentioned,
Cedar.
Cedar mentioned, sorry, it brought into power a large party that not only is part of the government now and giving it direction, but is also changing the architecture of Israeli political life. Let me explain what I mean. Because of the nature of Israeli politics, every government has to be a coalition government. Even the two largest parties together cannot form 61 members of Knesset. So the smaller parties usually have some power to determine the direction of a country. Now, with the right-wing bloc pretty clearly dominating, the religious extremists have the power not only to influence the government, but to also set its directions. When religious extremism comes to power in a country which claims it wants to be a Jewish country, openly, it becomes very important to define who is a Jew and what is considered Jewish. These religious parties not only have an extremist definition of who is a Jew, but they specifically want to exclude Reform Jews as being sort of a non-religion or an inauthentic expression of Judaism for purposes of politics in Israel today. In order to accommodate them, a new department was created called the Department of Jewish Identity. And it was given the authority in spheres of government that define Judaism and Jewishness for purposes of immigration, for purposes of personal status law that already was defined as being ultra-Orthodox, but also for purposes of education and preparing curricula. So right now, if I were to say who is most riled up and who is most frightened and who is most worried about the recent elections, I would say even more than the Palestinians, who really never had much hope from the centrist or even the leftist governments. It is now the secular Jews, the moderate Jews, the liberal Zionists, and the Reform Jews who feel now they are being put on the other side of the picture. This is really very significant because it says a lot about what is going to be the future. When the elections took place, I wrote a little article, which you may find on FOSNA's website, where I said that the results of the elections were predictable, inevitable, and irreversible. This is very, very harsh to say, but it is necessary for Israel to maintain itself as a Jewish state and to rule over basically 7 million non-Jews living under its control. No matter how liberal or progressive or democratic the Zionists may feel, they are forced to move towards an extremist, a fascist, and a pseudo-religious view in order to maintain their domination. This is a part of the very nature of the beast. Zionism cannot survive as a secular liberal democracy because it needs to rule another people. And the only way you can do that is by taking on extreme positions on race and on religion. This is, I think, in the very nature of the beast. And it is very frightening. It's frightening to, obviously, to Palestinians. It's frightening to people worldwide who are concerned about peace and justice and morality and human rights. But it's also very worrisome to Jewish Israelis who still have a conscience, who still have a positive view and outlook, who still hope for peace, hope for some form of reconciliation. They are being told that that is not in the books. Reverend Naim's booklet is very useful because he looks at it as an academic scholar as well. He studies the scripture. He points out that there are different views in the Bible itself between the Torah and the prophets on how do you treat the Gentile living among you, the non-Jew who lives under Jewish authority and power. There is one view in the Torah that is very chauvinistic, that treats that ger, that Gentile, as somehow less than the Jew. But there's another view in the prophets which insists that justice demands that you should treat that resident alien, that ger toshav, who's living with you, on the basis of equality, that you give him a share in the land, that you give him equality of access to resources, because that's what a just God demands. So it's important to see how the religious battle in the hearts and minds of Jews is going to be carried out now. Not only Jews generally, but even religious Jews who are being asked to define their religion. Is your religion an exclusivist, racist religion? Is your chosenness a feature of privilege and supremacy? Or is it a special calling that still preserves humanity and universal values? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Now we will move to Tina Whitehead, a very dedicated friend of Sabeel and the Palestinian people. Tina served as a volunteer with the United Methodist Church in East Jerusalem and Bethlehem from 2006 till 2020, when COVID forced her home. She worked primarily with Sabeel, but also with the Bethlehem Bible College, where she coordinated the first crisis at the Checkpoint Conference in 2010. She continues her advocacy for Palestine in Pennsylvania, where she teaches a course entitled The Palestinian Story, Hope in the Absence of Hope. Tina Whitehead.
Thank you, Omar. 2 years ago, Naim and I were working on these booklets on various topics dealing with Palestinian liberation theology. And booklet 10, Challenging Religious Extremism, was completed last December. Naim believes strongly that this was an urgent issue that needed to be addressed. And he put together 2 articles that he had previously written, along with 6 op-ed pieces that he believed provided strong evidence of the extremism that was gaining more support in Israel. One of the articles was written in 2016 by Carlos Strenger, a Swiss-Israeli professor of philosophy and psychology, entitled Smotrich, The Future of Israel, ? That was written 6 years ago. And now, 6 years later, his question is being answered. Bezalel Smotrich, along with Ithamar Ben-Gvir, are featured prominently in Netanyahu's government. Smotrich, the head of the religious Zionist party, is being named Minister of Finance and given control over the policy on Israeli settlements. He has stated a strong belief that Israel has the right to annex the entire West Bank. This is what Strenger has written in his piece. He states that Smotrich was known at that time primarily for 3 beliefs. 1, favoring segregation of Jewish and Palestinian women in Israeli hospital maternity wards. 2, declaring himself to be a proud homophobe. And 3, believing that Reform Judaism is a fake religion. Strenger wrote that Smotrich could be written off as a weird, bizarre extremist, but warns that he is an educated, crafty politician with an intellectually sharp mind, which has made him attractive to both the religious and the secular. Smotrich desires to abort any hope of a Palestinian homeland and offers the Palestinians 3 choices: to leave, to fight and be mercilessly destroyed, or to accept living under Israeli rule without political or voting rights. Strenger warns that religious nationalism is taking over Israel's education system and gaining strength in the army, giving more and more support to this extremist thinking, which portrays Jews as the superior chosen people with God-given rights that trump notions like human rights and gender equality. As a psychologist, he points to the cognitive dissonance theory, which has shown that human beings cannot live feeling that what they do is bad. So instead of changing their behavior, they change their beliefs so that they can feel justified in acting as they do. And he states that a growing number of Israelis are avoiding the guilt of the occupation by adopting the national religious ideology that justifies Israel's actions. He ends his article with a warning, comparing Smotrich's belief in the chosenness of the Jewish people to the white supremacism that has, in his words, raised its ugly head during the Trump era. His last sentences are especially prophetic. Liberal, secular Israelis should take this very seriously. It may well be Israel's future. And now, 6 years later, it has become Israel's present.
Thank you very much, Tina. Not only Israel's present, it's also part of our present, unfortunately. I had the privilege of being introduced to Hadar, maybe like a few months ago. Hadar Cohen is an Arab Jewish artist and educator. She is the founder of Malkot, I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, a mystical school teaching direct experiences, a direct experience of God through heart-centered spiritual traditions. You can also, she is also a political writer with a column at the New Arab, and we will share the link in the chat. Hadar, may you please unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Omar, for having me. It's such an honor to be here with this beautiful community. I'm going to present on one of the essays that appears in the appendix by Gideon Levy, who is an Israeli Jewish activist. And he talks about Israel's Minister of Truth, Ayelet Shaked. And, you know, one of the things that I find quite interesting about his piece is that he's pretty much writing about how we are getting into this moment where you know, Zionist defenders themselves are very explicit that it's a racist colonial movement, right? In the past, there was a sense, and especially, you know, as a Jewish person, I know this, that many Jewish people are raised on this belief that Zionism is a movement of justice, right? That Zionism and justice is synonymous. But these days, we're really seeing, especially Israeli politicians who are talking almost explicitly about how Zionism and justice are incompatible and that they prefer Zionism over justice. So he particularly points out how Ayelet Shaked prefers Zionism to human rights, the ultimate universal justice. She believes that we have a different kind of justice superior to universal justice, Zionism above all. And, you know, I think the thing that's kind of fascinating about the moment that we're in is that they're quite explicit about that. You know, they're not trying to hide behind it's a universal human values, but they're actually explicitly defending that. And he continues, Gideon Levy continues, and he writes how thus Shaked believes, as do many around the world, that Israel is built on the foundations of injustice and therefore must be defended from all the hostile talk of justice. So, you know, I think it's quite this interesting moment, and feeding off the last speaker around how, you know, Israeli liberal Jews are really faced with this decision right now, because I think it's becoming quite clear that Zionism at its core is a racist movement, and that it's incompatible with the value of justice, especially when we're seeing, right, the rise of religious extremism and the people who are teaching that to be explicitly sharing that they're not coming from a justice perspective, which, you know, on the one hand, for me personally, is quite refreshing that at least there's that honesty there and that there's a way of seeing things clearly. But on the other hand, you know, the understanding how the educational propaganda works, that people are still quite scared to really stick up in Israeli society. At least they're really scared to speak up for justice. And I'll just share personally, you know, as a Jewish person, one of the things that also makes me quite sad about religious extremism in Israeli society is how every holiday has become so militarized and has become so part of lifting up the Zionist regime. For example, right now we're in the beautiful holiday of Hanukkah, which is really all about the divine light and how the divine light really survives through all forms of oppression, and how this is, you know, the light that we share generation after generation, is this light of God and the light of justice and the light of truth. So, you know, it's quite disheartening to see every part of Jewish tradition just be taken to be part of this religious fundamentalism of Zionism. So that is my share. And again, thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be here, and learning so much, hearing from all the other speakers as well.
Thank you very much, Hadar. The next speaker with us is, she has sent a recording of her contribution. She has an appointment that she cannot miss in attending. Many of you are already know Angela Godfrey. Angela Godfrey has been very active with Palestinian. She's an Israeli, maybe even also an Israeli-Palestinian activist. She works very closely with the Bedouin communities in Palestine and Israel. She has played a very big part in the creation and within the development of the work of ICAD, Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Angela, whenever we lead a group in Palestine and Israel visiting a home that just got demolished or doing a delegation for solidarity, she always appears among the rebels with her own group and speaking like a true prophet. I hope, please let me know if you're able to see and hear Angela fine.
So first of all, I would like to wish you all a very happy Christmas, happy Advent. And for those of you Jewish who may be here, also happy Hanukkah, Chag Sameach. This is a very challenging time. And the good news, I guess, is that in these days of darkness, at least the fig leaves are off. We can now see what has been disguised for many years. With people like Ayelet Shaked in 2017, having spoken very clearly then, and Gidon Levy having picked that up, because she spoke in 2017 about the fact that Zionism negates human rights. And until then, I think everybody was trying here in Israel to say that there's no problem, Zionism is taking on board international law and human rights and the multilateral system. Whereas those of us who have been working in this region for human rights and justice know very well that the occupation has recklessly continued to take land, to Judaize, to oppress, to deny, and to expel. If we needed another example, I would say that yesterday, Ayelet Shaked, currently the Minister of the Interior, on her way out, ordered the expulsion, the deportation of Salah Khoury, a human rights defender who has therefore been kicked out of his homeland to France against international law, against the critique of the international community and so forth. So what she did in 2017 was pretty radical. She has said basically that racism is okay. It's justified in our case here in Israel and necessary. This has encouraged an exclusive supremacist viewpoint, worldview, alienated from mainstream thinking, or indeed from a rights-based approach. And that found extreme expression in 2018, a year after this article by Gideon Levy, when the nation-state law was passed, which actually condones a form of supremacy and racism. So today, Judaization, occupation, settlements, the cult of security, which is engendered increasingly by fear-mongering, so that the ghetto mentality has been wired into the thinking of mainstream Israelis. And the use of the army, the Israeli Defense Forces, has now become a full-time army to police occupation. What they on the right wing, and increasing we have a right-wing government coming into place far right now, what they're saying is we prefer Zionism to justice. It's our mission, it's our identity, this is our history. And Gideon is saying this is really an expression of a very fundamentalist viewpoint of religion. And it obviously contradicts all Palestinian rights to their own land. It also puts us up against the world, and at a time when really we do need to be able to work together in days of climate crisis and emergency. We need to be able to defend the weaker on the planet and to solve the issues together. This is absolutely requiring a holistic approach, a viewpoint that peace is essential because military emissions are creating the worst damage to the planet. So this is hardly a good time, shall we say, to espouse fascism and other elements of military control, even though one can understand that some of the increasing stress or lack of resources is pushing people towards elements of fascism. So I think my final reflection on this is that what she has said and what the right wing is practicing and condoning and putting into law, a very dark worldview, undermines the value of love. And I think that that is really essential for those of us who care about the way forwards. I certainly see this as not just at the heart of Jesus' teachings, but also apparent in the teachings of all of the Jewish prophets and wise leaders who went before him, such as King Solomon, whose lesson about sharing a baby was, as I interpret it, a supreme lesson in love. When the heart is engaged, sacrifice is instinctive. It is not something that should be questioned. So, to finish, too many Israelis, in my view, especially on the right, are espousing, embracing values of land grab, Judaization, and taking, which seem to deny the heart, which seem to deny shared humanity, or even the basics of generous sharing, which I keep saying even children in kindergarten understand when it comes to sharing their toys. So Zionism, for me, is a fundamentalist viewpoint that implicitly embraces exclusivity, which alienates, which leads us back to very dark days in our history, away from light, and leads one to believe that tragically Israel and Israelis did not learn from the lessons of their own history. On the contrary, abused families are abusing, and fascism should not be acceptable.
I mean, it's one of the most interesting conversations I've had with Angela. Is actually just after the Israeli elections. She came to Sabeel office, and she came, I mean, by taking a bus which was filled with right-wing activists on the same bus. So she spent the whole journey from Tel Aviv to Sabil, dealing with people who were shouting like death to Arabs on the bus. And then she came to Sabil and she was very angry. That was the angriest moment in my life that I've seen Angela. I have the pleasure to introduce now Samia Khoury, similar to Cedar Duaybis, another a mother of liberation theology, one of our founding members and founding members of Palestinian liberation theology. I remember when I started working at Sabil, I was doing logistics. So I would prepare for groups to come and to have speakers to come to them. And I remember we'd also sometimes get like difficult people, visitors, and Reverend Naim was always saying, like giving us advice, try to avoid speaking about these issues. And I'd love it when Samia comes and she's the speaker, because she would only speak about controversial issues. So I mean, it's Samia Khoury is a true prophet in a time of conflict and the need of prophet. So Samia Khoury, please.
Thank you, Omar, for this warm welcome. I remember the first time we interviewed Omar. I think Cedar and I were interviewing him, and we were impressed by him as a young man still. And I was telling Assis Naim, are you sure he can cope, you know? And he said, he has potential. I'm sure he does. And we encouraged him a lot, and he turned out to be very capable and worthy of our confidence. Well, I was asked to comment on Ban Ki-moon's part of this booklet. I fully agree with Ban Ki-moon that a new approach for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is needed. But while he recognizes the importance of the international community, I must admit that it was the international community that created the problem in the first place by partitioning Palestine. And furthermore, it has failed to implement all the UN resolutions regarding the conflict, even the resolution after the June 1967, which was unanimously passed by the international community, demanding the withdrawal of Israel from the occupied territories. Normally, however, because of the structure of the United Nations and the veto power that some of the members have, no sanctions have ever been possible against Israel for not abiding by the resolutions of the international community. And yes, it is indeed clear that the 1993 Oslo Accords no longer offer a viable pathway towards self-determination or peace for the Palestinians. Not only because Israel has pursued a policy of incremental de facto annexation, but because those accords lack the basic requirements for peace in the first place. There should have been a complete withdrawal of the occupation forces before negotiations between occupying forces and people under occupation will never give Palestinians any justice, not even the relative justice that the Palestinians were willing to settle for by establishing their own state on the 1967 borders. Furthermore, it's worth noting that many of the prisoners who were supposed to be released at the time of the Oslo Accords are still languishing in Israeli jails up to this day. The division of the occupied territories by Oslo Accords into areas A, B, C also proved to be another disaster for the Palestinians and gave access to Israel for more land confiscation and expansion of settlements. But Israel was never serious about peace. It just wanted the piece of land, P-I-E-C-E, and not P-E-A-C-E. If it were genuinely interested, it would have jumped at the Saudi initiative at the Arab Summit meeting in 2002, which the Arab countries promised full recognition of Israel, provided it withdraws to the border of 1967, where the Palestinians were already committed to establish their state. So versus all this compromise from 1948 borders to just the 1967 borders was even refused by Israel. Now this new Israeli government is offering the Palestinians a choice between transfer, apartheid, or genocide. Once again, I pose the question to Mr. Ban Ki-moon. Who will eventually have the guts to tell Israel enough is enough? Will the USA, as a leading power in the international community that continues to shield Israel from any sanctions, over and above its supporting it financially and morally, take a serious stand, raise its voice, and impose sanctions on it in the same manner that it imposes on all other countries that do not abide by international law? Will this grave injustice be redressed, thus giving Palestinians hope for a brighter future? Or will they be forced to lose hope completely in the international community, thus resorting to violence against the violence of the Jewish state? Or only choice, their only choice will be disastrous for the whole region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auntie Samia. It's an honor for me to introduce the next speaker, Father David Neuhaus, who is a Jesuit Catholic priest. He has lived for over 45 years in Jerusalem. He teaches scripture in different academic institutions in Palestine and Israel. This is what he actually sent us, how he would like to be introduced. But I think it is, if you're interested in theology and you're interested in controversial issues and you're interested in getting engaged in areas that nobody wants to engage with, if you don't speak with Father David Neuhaus, you'll have to refer, or his name comes up in every conversation. So Father David Neuhaus is is one of the treasures of Jerusalem, and a true blessing for us as Sabil and for me personally. So it's a pleasure to have you with us, Father David.
Thank you, Omar. I repeat what Cedar said in the beginning. You exaggerate a lot. For me, it's an honor to come after Samia. And I want to say, and I'm sure many of us are praying for Shadi, really, in our prayers as we move towards Christmas. I feel that I don't have a lot to add to what has already been said. So I'm going to make 3 points. The first one is perhaps to explain that each of us is commenting on articles that Qasis Naim appended to his book that might not be clear to those who have not seen the little booklet. And so I have been asked to comment briefly on Appendix 5, which is an article reviewing a book written about the teaching about Christianity in Israeli schools. I think that, again, the article is, of course, linked to the question of extremism, but I'm going to say that I'm very pleased that these appendices have been added, because as Jonathan Kuttab stressed, as did Hadar and other speakers, what is happening in this process of extremism becoming more and more explicit in Israeli political life? Let us remember, of course, that we are dealing with 74 years of inequality since 1948, 55 years of military occupation, and an education system that is functioning within this context is, of course, leading to a situation of extremism. But what I find helpful in the appendices is, as Jonathan and Hadar and others have pointed out, Israeli voices beginning to speak out with greater and greater clarity on the side of justice and against the extremism and discrimination and occupation that we have been living all through these decades since 1948, and of course even more underlined after 1967, so that the lines are being changed by what is being revealed. I've also been asked to comment on Appendix 6, which refers to a statement from an article, in fact, written by our Greek Orthodox Patriarch Theophilus, in which he points to acts by extremists against Christians. And of course, what I want to say there is, of course, the extremism is against all people, minorities, and all other people who try to speak a language of sanity. And the danger to the Christian community is not only that they are suffering acts of violence, but that they retreat into a ghetto created by fear. And again, here in Sabil, we have, thanks to Naim Ateek, thanks to Cedar and Samia, thanks to Jonathan Kuttab and the continuing work of Omar, we have a Christian voice that refuses to go into the ghetto, a Christian voice that speaks out and says no to fear. But it's also a Christian voice that says, I want to find allies across the traditional lines. I want to find Muslim brothers and sisters, Jewish brothers and sisters that share our vision of society so that we together can create new lines of division, lines that perhaps are not the lines of national identity and nationalism, but rather lines that are defined by sane people who want equality, who want justice, who want peace. And I think that here we have Jewish voices and a Jewish presence, even in this assembly, that are calling for that, and those that continue to want discrimination, violence, and destruction. So I want to say a special thank you to Naim, to Canon Naim, to Qasis Naim, who is raising again a very important question. And thanks to Sabil and Qasis Naim, I think it is wonderful to see that what you founded is continuing through the work of a younger generation, Sausan and Draus, and of course, under the able leadership of Omar, that is making the voice of Sabil a voice of sanity and reaching out to create alliances that can take on with courage the challenge of speaking up and opposing the extremism that we see now, as many have said, manifesting in an Israeli government that shouts out what was formerly said and formerly whispered, but we're dealing with decades of discrimination and occupation. And so our work is a very, very big one. Thank you that I can be a small part of it with you.
Thank you, Abuna. We're all developing a reputation, everybody. I mean, we are a community. We all love each other. We all work together. And I think if we can expand this feelings among the community to the rest of the country, there will be no problems. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Reverend Naim Ateek. Most of you know him. He is the father of Palestinian liberation theology, a co-founder of Sabil, a very dedicated person and known for his amazing theological work. But very interesting, in the local community, when we speak about Reverend Naim, we speak in a different way. People say he's a good man, he's a good Christian, he's brave, he's open, he's honest, he does not discriminate, he understands what justice is. He's not like the others. And if we take all of these traits of a person of religion and we put it in religion, you cannot have religious extremism. Reverend Naim, please unmute yourself, Assis.
Thank you, Omar. I'd like to thank everyone for sharing with us this time. And I appreciate very much your presence. And in one sense, before I give my short reflection, I would like to recognize one person here that I have not seen for a good number of years. and she's with us, Jan Davis, from from England. And I just want to welcome her and say just a couple of sentences about her. But Jan was the person who started Friends of Sabil in the UK. And I am forever grateful for the dedication and the strength that she put in creating and in establishing Friends of Sabil in the UK. At the same time, I still remember after our 1996 conference in Jerusalem, when she and Betsy Barlow from the United States, we got together, and I invited them whether they're able to really help us. And so Jan started working in the UK, and Betsy Barlow started working in the United States. And it was due to their energy and their dedication that they really helped us in starting Friends of Sabil in those two important countries in that sense. So thank you, Jan, for being with us, and may God be with you. I know you have not really been feeling well, and so I ask you all to pray for Jan, and thank you for being with us at this time. May God bless you. Okay, we are coming to the end of this launching of this booklet. I still have one more booklet that needs to be launched, and I hope for another time we will be able to do it. But the question is now for us, what can we do? What is our response to religious extremism? And I just want to begin with, I believe that Jesus himself defined religious extremism. When he said in the Gospel of John, he said, the time will come when those who kill you will think that they are doing God a service, or they are offering worship to God. Just imagine how true that is. And in the history of our church, the history of the church, we have a guy, a person, a man who was a religious extremist. He was Saul of Tarsus. He was, the book of Acts talks about him, and he says, and they say, he was breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord. Again, just listen to the words, please. You know, this reflects religious extremism. He was breathing threats and murder against disciples of the Lord. So out of his religious zeal, he rounded up and persecuted followers of Jesus, and he approved the stoning and death of Stephen, one of the young Christian converts in those days. So the story of Saul, who later became St. Paul, the Apostle Paul, the religious extremist, and his conversion is part of Christian history. Certainly, our three religions can share stories of how their adherents were persecuted at the hands of extremists of another religion. Oftentimes, some of the worst religious persecutions happen from within the same religion. As examples, one can point to the wars between Catholics and Protestants within Christianity In Islam, Sunnis and Shias. In Judaism, Haredim and secular Jews within Judaism. So we need to recognize that our religious histories are full of crimes committed against each other. And tragically, Western Christians also bear responsibility for atrocities against other religions. The most striking examples are the Crusades and Western Christians' anti-Semitism. The basic truth is that none of us is innocent. All of us have sinned against God and neighbor. So we need to stand before God in humility and repentance. When I reflect on religious extremism, I wonder, is the crisis brought about by religious extremism the result of faulty interpretation of religious and sacred texts, or is it in the content and substance of these texts? This is one of the most basic theological problems in the Bible. Do we have the courage to say that the problem is in the text itself that reflects a violent God? Such text could not have been inspired by a good, loving, merciful, and compassionate God. Similarly, the text, for example, in Numbers, the book of Numbers in the Old Testament and in Deuteronomy, that speak about driving out the indigenous people of the land and killing them, cannot be inspired by the good and loving God, but rather by a tribal human mindset. It is human blindness that refuses to see that the authentic God of the Bible is the loving, merciful, and compassionate God who requires of us to do justice and to live in humility and peace with one another. Finally, what are the antidotes to the malaise of religious extremism? I would like to suggest a simple exercise. Every religion of the three, at least, I'm talking about Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, every religion needs to identify what constitutes the heart of its religious faith, as well as the core of its religious and spiritual values. This exercise must be done not only by religious people, but by the laity, by men and women, whether practicing their religion or not. How do ordinary people understand and articulate the core of their religious faith? How do ordinary people understand God? And the crux of it all, how do they regard their neighbor? This is at the heart. Can people produce a criterion that can help them test and measure their behavior in light of the core values of their religion? In my belief as a Christian, love is the criterion that can help us measure our religion, our beliefs, our faith, and our behavior. So let me end with two quotations from the New Testament. These are, I think, the antidote to religious extremism. The first quotation comes from Saul of Tarsus himself, Paul, the Apostle Paul. After his conversion, he wrote to the Church of Corinth, and I would like to ask Omar to put the quotation on the screen. Yes. because please, let's read it together. I'm only taking here only 3 verses, the first 3 verses from the Apostle Paul's letter to the church in Corinth. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body to be burned, so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Let's continue, Omar, the next. Just, well, yeah. No, before, Omar, go back, please, at the end of that. Omar, can you go back just a few lines? Okay. Love is the antidote. Love trumps faith. Love supersedes knowledge, trumps knowledge, and love trumps martyrdom. Can you imagine? I believe this was the revolution which Jesus Christ accomplished. Indeed, Jesus was brought up in a religious home in Nazareth and was taught to love God and to obey the religious laws. But later, Jesus realized that under the facade of religiosity, there was a deep-seated hypocrisy and racism that cannot belong to authentic religious faith. Authentic religious faith rejects any tribal, exclusive, and nationalist understanding of God. It rejects bigotry and racism. Authentic religious faith sees God as the God of all people. It sees God's love and mercy embracing all people with no exceptions. The second quotation that I'd like to leave you with, Jesus Christ, we believe, is the source. He has given us the antidote of love for healing our religious extremism. So let me read from the Gospel of Matthew, and this is part of the Sermon on the Mount. But let us listen carefully to this and see how we can respond to it. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? My final words, the antidote to the malaise of religious extremism, my friends, is love. It is left to us to translate love into a strategy of action that can work in each of our various cultures. This is our wake-up call. We Muslims, Christians, and Jews must take a good look at our religions and measure them against the demand of love of God and love of our neighbor. This is the challenge that confronts us all. I'm thankful to all the people who took part in this. I hope we will have few moments for questions. I know we might be speaking mainly to the choir, but what can we do now in light of what we have heard about what's happening back home in Palestine? What can we do as people of faith, and how can we translate what we have heard today and what we need to do for our brothers and sisters who live today under the occupation, the illegal occupation of the Israelis. So I'll stop here and invite Omar to begin. Do we have time, Omar, for questions and answers?
We have some time for some questions and answers. So please do raise your hand electronically, and we'll try. Please make them questions, not speeches, if it's possible. Steve?
Hi, yeah, Steve France in Washington. I have just two suggestions. One is that the Christian churches and the Muslim mosques should no longer collaborate with the government of Israel. And in that sense, as long as the government of Israel is not allowing them to be the religions that they are, that they should cease to permit. They should close down the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Church of the Nativity. And I'm not quite sure what Muslims would do, perhaps in the same way in terms of the Haram al-Sharif. But there should be a really clear line drawn that this is not. Our religions don't collaborate and find little ways to get along with this kind of a force. And secondly, it seems to me that in the US at least, there should be a really concerted effort to seek out Jews in their synagogues in brotherly respect and love to plead for a dialogue about what is happening in Israel. And whenever I've suggested anything like this, people say, leave, don't do that, you're challenging Jewish religion, but I don't think it needs to be seen that way. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I wish we have time to really discuss your suggestions. It is easier to say than to really do back home. At the New Year's or around it, the Israeli president expects all the heads of churches to go and so that he can wish them Happy New Year. It's very interesting. And they all go. They all go. They all go.
It's not interesting. It's ironic, I think.
I know. It's unbelievable. So it's not. It's a wonderful idea. I've thought of this many times. But many of our bishops do not even dare to speak out against the occupation clearly, so on. So I think maybe we need to, I don't know, it'll be good to hear other thoughts on this, but I think maybe we need to do more in this country, in the United States, maybe this is where the pressure needs to be on the Congress and the president here. That's Omar next.
Yeah. Samia Khoury, I see you're already unmuted.
I just want to seize the opportunity of having Janet with us. And I recall in 2006, November 2006, when we met for a conference and we were having dinner at the Jericho Resort in November, that and I felt I had to say a few words for Janet in rhyme. So I just want to share them with you, if you don't mind. From all of us, board, staff, and volunteers at CBL, we want to express to you, dear Janet, how we feel. This is an opportunity to use some imagination in expressing on behalf of our deep appreciation. The wonderful UK has, Friends of Sabil UK has so much life. You were there for its birth as a midwife. A lifetime could be the limit with little ones so timid. The privilege of, I think I have the wrong, I turned the wrong page. Yeah, no wonder. Yeah, your commitment and dedication made it grow. Your personal giving and efforts made it flow. For your perseverance and devotion to our cause, you deserve from all Palestinians a big applause. Thank you, Janet, for your commitment, and we feel we miss you being with us most of the time now. We know your situation doesn't allow you much, but we're very grateful for all what you have done. And we're glad you're with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Samia. People have been asking for the book. Yes, please do write us if you'd like us to send you an electronic version of the book, or if you'd like to purchase a hard copy of the book, please send us an email and we will help you in receiving it. Steve Davis.
That was my question, Omar. Thank you.
You see, it's we're still able to predict the future.
I see Omar.
Yes, Yaakov. Yaakov.
Rabkin. Yeah, Dr. Rabkin. Rabbi. Nice to see you. Very good to see you.
Please unmute yourself.
Please unmute. Unmute. Yes.
Perfect. Well, I'm very pleased and honored to be taking part here. I'm a historian. I'm Professor Emeritus of History at the University of Montreal, but now I'm speaking from Russia. And I want to make 2 points. I'm coming from a conference that took place 3 weeks ago in Santiago de Chile on Christian Zionism. And I was privileged to give a talk on the connections between Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism, so to speak. And I think that this is a point, that historical point, that is important, particularly here, that Herzl was influenced by an Anglican chaplain of the British Embassy.
Yes.
And the idea, the Christian Zionism not only precedes Jewish Zionism, but also had a direct impact on its emergence. And I'm mentioning it because I think it's a historical detail that may open some ears, because we're talking about, I think one of the greatest challenges here is to open ears of people who don't want to listen. And the second point about Judaism, it may sound a little bit self-advertising, but I published a book on Jewish opposition to Zionism. And for many people, it's an unknown subject. I've tried to do a book that covers different kinds of Jews, mostly religious Jews, but also Reform and others, who have opposed Zionism throughout the last 120 years. And this book is available in quite a few languages, including Hebrew, English, and Arabic, which are the three languages that I think matter here. So I think that by indicating that the religious Zionism party and the other extremists that are about to join the government constitute a real rupture, a real discontinuity with Judaism. It's a new kind of religion. And as you know, monotheism has had quite a few splits in its history, and that's another one I think that is happening. So rather than comparing them with Jewish communities in the world and minorities and all that, this is a totally different kind of animal, and we have to relate to it as a different kind of animal, not comparing it with the Jewish tradition, which these people explicitly rejected. And I think now the good thing about the new government is that it's becoming more and more explicit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I still remember meeting you in Canada, and I've always appreciated what you have written. Yeah, so thank you for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I would like to add that the book is now available in 15 languages, but one language was conspicuously absent, and that was very important for me. And that was not Hebrew, because in Israel, the book was received quite positively. Even the settlers from Arutz Sheva interviewed me on the radio. So,
oh, really? That's great.
Yeah, no, for them it's important. For honest people among them,
yes,
they have to put up with the situation that most rabbis of the 20th century oppose Zionism, because they think that they're in the good company. They're not. So for them, it's a real challenge, and they seriously want to explore it. So, but one language which was very resistant to my book, of course, was German. Because in Germany, saying anything bad about Zionism is tantamount to criminal transgression, not just. So finally, it's coming out.
Very good.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
very happy about it. But that's the most difficult country, I think, to
Thank you
about it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cedar?
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi Yaakov Rabkin. I mean, it is these voices that are also an antidote to religious extremism. And I'd love to read your book. Also, I was thinking of Mark Ellis. I mean, it's liberation theology. It's our liberation theology and other liberation theologies, Jewish and Muslim, that are an antidote to religious extremism. I have no doubt. And the voice of Mark Ellis, who is a theologian, and the voice of Mark Braverman, who's not a theologian, but speaks like one, that needs to be spread, because this is the antidote to religious extremism. When our Palestinian Christian liberation theology started, we used to read the Bible in a different way. I grew up reading the Bible like those settlers read the Bible, but we didn't think that this would really happen. And when Assis Naim started, and he had this vision of Palestinian liberation theology, our whole reading of the Bible changed. And it's like the real voice of religion that needs to be heard. So both Christian and Jewish and Muslim liberation theologies that we have a kernel of, I mean, it's there, but it needs to be spread. And I think this is, of course, love, as you said, Assis, is very important, but also voices like those are very, very important.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Cedar. Next.
Don Wagner.
Well, this has been a remarkable session, and we really need another one like this, I think. I just want to make a few points and put a few in the chat. I agree, it's all about love, but we need a dimension of tough love now. I think we've been way too soft on our critique of what Zionism has become and Christian Zionism. And we need to be a bit more aggressive, I think, or at least a few of us, because this might be risky business. Christian Zionism is a heresy. And I think we need to have a theology that interprets why and what it is. It is a historical theology that embraces racism, settler colonialism, and even justifies genocide. Land of no people for a people with no land and beyond. Second, I think we need to have a group of attorneys that look at the tax loopholes in the West that fund groups like Christians United for Israel, the Zionist organizations, and enable them, to do what they do. And then, I always am cautious about this, but I think we do need to highlight how the Christian community in Palestine is under attack in various ways, but I always do it in the context with all Palestinians being under attack. But the churches still owns a considerable amount of land. I think we may need to make a point of this. And the Zionists covet that land, and the Christian community is small and vulnerable. So we need to stand up with them, but highlight some of those things. So I'm just calling for a little bit more aggressive, assertive approach of tough love on Christian Zionism and Zionism. But thank you. This has been really inspiring and enriching.
Thank you, Don. And maybe, I'm just again thinking aloud, but maybe some of you who are able to also think about what we need to do and so on, maybe under the leadership of Fazna now and Jonathan, maybe some of us can begin to think about in terms of strategy that we really need to, because if we shouldn't stop with just these words that we've shared with you or this research that we have been able to do. We really need to go beyond that, and we need to think about a strategy that can work at this time. And some of you probably are good in creating a strategy, and maybe under the leadership of Jonathan, maybe we can begin to think about this. So it will demand maybe a group of people who want to think about such a strategy. And I agree, we need to be tough, and we need to look beyond the words that we've mentioned to the strategy that whether back in Israel or for Israel and Palestine or for the United States. But I believe that things will change if the government here in the United States will change, because they're the ones who are allowing the extremists to continue to be, So I think we need to continue. I hope we will not stop here. And as to,
I don't think
sorry, just one little thing. As to Christian Zionism, I still have this booklet which has not been launched, and it really and this is why Professor Rapkin mentioned about the role Anglicans played, and I'm an Anglican, Episcopalian. When we look at what we have done as Anglicans, I agree with you. Going back to Herzl, and his best friend there was an Anglican priest. And I mentioned all of this in the new booklet, which I've written about challenging Christian Zionism, and it's basically reflecting on the Anglican role in this. It's shameful, and I admit that, and that's very important to also realize that. And I hope, with the help of Omar, we can soon launch this other booklet. I think it's going to be number 9. We just did number 10 now, and it is about Anglican role in the Christian Zionism. Thank you. Next, Omar, any other?
I think we're up with the time, Assis.
Okay.
So as I said, please write us. We're going to be sending you a personalized email letting you know of the booklet and the ability of the different ways that you may receive it. We're planning also to launch in the near future the book on Christian Zionism. Also next week, after Christmas on the 27th, we're also launching a book of one of our friends, Javier Abu Eid. He speaks about leading Palestinian Christian activists or influential activists in the last 100 years. We think it's a very good book and brings new insight to the Palestinian story. We wish you all a wonderful evening, and we wish you a Merry Christmas. And we've asked Reverend Naim to lead us. Yes, and we will be closing with a prayer that Reverend Naim will lead us in.
Let us pray. O God, you have taught us that without love, whatever we do is worth nothing. Send your Holy Spirit and pour into our hearts your greatest gift, which is love, the true bond of peace and of all virtue, without which whoever lives is counted dead before you. Grant this for the sake of your only Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Merry Christmas to all, and may God bless us all. And we'll see some of you next Thursday for Bible study.
Thursday, in 2 days. Every Thursday, for the people who are not aware, Sabil holds a service led by Reverend Naim Ateek. It's a Mystery of the Word. It's a Bible study where we reflect on the readings of the week, together with Reverend Naim and many of the founders of Sabil. We invite, everyone is welcome, and every Tuesday we have the Kumi session. In solidarity and love and in serving one another, we leave you this evening or this morning or afternoon, depending on what part of the world you are from. May God bless you all, and thank you.
Thank you all.